The message will center on the need for other nations to join forces with the U.S. in the fight against extremists. Joining me now is Ambassador James Jeffrey, former U.S. ambassador to Iraq and Turkey. He's also the former Deputy National Security Advisor, President George W. Bush. Ambassador, good of you to join us today, and certainly we want to hear your insights and perspective on what you see unfolding in this historic first trip for the President of the United States.
This is extraordinary. He's starting in the Islamic world, then going to Israel, then to Rome. So he hits all three of the major, if you will, monotheistic religions, then to Brussels, and then to Italy to do NATO, the European Union, the French president, and then the G7 states, including Canada and Japan. So it's an extraordinarily long and tough visit, but he will set all kinds of signals in doing this, beginning with relations with the Islamic world and the fight against terror, the fight against Iran, and the fight for a stabilized world under American leadership. That's the message he's trying very hard to get out.
And Ambassador, as you know, that is a strong message to get out, and certainly one that is vital, not only to the national security interests of the United States, but the national security interests of the world as it relates to fighting al-Qaeda and ISIS. People don't mention al-Qaeda, but if you think about Saudi Arabia, al-Qaeda has its roots right there in Saudi Arabia because of the extremist form of Islam that's taught there, Wahhabism. Can you explain what the president will have to do during the trip and beyond to get the Saudi Arabia government to try to diminish the effect that Wahhabism has on young Islamic people in the world, and why it might cause further disturbances in terms of peace?
That's a very important point. Saudi Arabia is our ally. Saudi Arabia is a victim of the very terrorism that some of the Saudi religious leaders and some of the Saudi population have supported. As you said, Osama bin Laden comes from a Yemeni Saudi family, a very prominent one, in fact. What the president is doing is he's working with the Saudis for them to set up an anti-extremist center, a center to try to work to get out messages of peace, messages of partnership with the outside world to the entire global Muslim community. That's a very different message than what some Saudi religious leaders, some Saudi imams are preaching. So it'll put Saudi Arabia in the hot spot, if you will, to counteract things that are coming out from their very own society. So that's a very wise step.
It's a wise step indeed. Now, I know that you worked in Iraq and you also worked in Turkey. I recall when I covered the war in Iraq back in 2004 that I learned then that they recognized the strong man. President Trump is appearing to be very strong at this point. There will be a lot of respect for him, kind of unlike what they had for President Obama, because President Obama didn't appear or show himself as being as strong as President Trump is right now in terms of stating very categorically what he says about Islam and the radical export of that. What will he have to say tomorrow in order not to offend the religious elite there, but to also inspire them to rally around him in this global war on terror, as we call it?
Yeah, good point. Having worked for Obama, the problem with him in the Middle East wasn't that he was perceived as weak. He was perceived as not understanding the Middle East. He was strong. He was strong on getting the nuclear deal with Iran. They just thought that was the wrong deal. President Trump has shown that he hears what the Turks, what the Israelis, and what the Sunni Arab states, or most of the states in the region, are saying. So in that respect, he's already way ahead of President Obama, who wanted to have the region share its future with Iran. And President Trump has also shown in increasing the military tempo against ISIS, the Islamic State, and in twice striking Syrian army forces supported in one way or another by Iran inside Syria in the last 6 weeks, that he's willing to use military force very effectively. That's not what President Trump, or rather President Obama, signaled in his actions in the Middle East.
Thank you for your candor on that. Before I let you go, I've got to show you some video of President Trump in Riyadh right now. We understand that he's also celebrating his time there. Let's take a look at that. I think we're actually going to see him, the president, dancing at some point. We know that the Saudis are welcome. Yeah, he's got a little jig there. So your comments on that, sir? It seems the president is enjoying the moment.
Absolutely. Washington is always tough for any president. It's nothing but hassles and molasses slow action. You get out on the world stage, particularly when you're being welcomed, and everybody welcomes this message the president has of American leadership, of American strength. This is what they're thirsting for, particularly in Saudi Arabia. But he's going to encounter this everywhere he goes. This trip is going to be, I think, very, very important because it also shows that President Trump is different than candidate Trump.
Ambassador James Jeffrey, well said. Thank you, sir. Good day to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your perspective. Well,